Good morning. Wow, that was great. These must be educators. I hope everyone had a great day yesterday, and welcome to day 2 of the NC WIT Summit. I hope you're getting to meet a lot of people and network and learn some new things. We're so glad you're here. One of the key ingredients of a community like ours is celebrating the accomplishments and contributions of one another. These awards serve both as inspiration and recognition for the hard work people are doing each and every day back at home. Yesterday, we celebrated multiple generations of personal achievement, and today, we honor 3 K-12 educators who are inspiring students to pursue their own aspirations in computing. The Educator Award is generously sponsored by AT&T, underscoring their commitment to inspiring future generations of technologists and their recognition of the critical role educators play. Here to present the Aspirations in Computing Educator Award national winners is Edie Cheng, NC WIT Director of Programs. Edie started her career as a software developer and holds a degree in computer science and an MBA. Prior to joining NC WIT, she was a CTO, entrepreneur, business consultant, and multimedia program manager. She's led Aspirations in Computing since 2017. Welcome, Edie.
Thank you, Terry. I'm so excited to be here today to present this award. Since its inception in 2011, the Regional Aspirations Educator Award has honored more than 950 formal and informal educators who encourage women, genderqueer, and non-binary high school students' passion for computing and technology. In 2018, we introduced the National Educator Award to celebrate outstanding educators who have previously received the Affiliate Award in their region. These amazing individuals embody the mission of NC WIT in their daily work inside and outside the classroom. With sustained encouragement, these educators broaden participation in computing through a focus on BIPOC students and underrepresented genders. There were many outstanding applicants this year, and we're thankful for all of the contributions that they make to their communities. Educators, both formal and informal, play a vital role in the tech ecosystem that NC WIT strives to enrich with diverse voices and experiences. Today, we announce the 2024 Educator Award national winners, Ms. Curry DeFeedy, Dr. Hannah Oldham, and Dr. Michael Wolf. Please welcome Ms. Curry DeFeedy to the stage. Curry is passionate about expanding computer science education's reach and impact, particularly for underrepresented students. She's the teacher leader for the CS department at Mineola High School on Long Island, New York, and has led initiatives to increase accessibility, resulting in a significant increase in enrollment from underrepresented groups. Curry founded and advises multiple robotics teams and computer science clubs, including the CS Honor Society and the Hackathon team. She has a master's in computer science from NYU and an advanced certificate in educational leadership from the College of St. Rose, and is a New York State master teacher. Next, please welcome Dr. Hannah Oldham to the stage. Dr. Oldham is a STEM Scholar Academy coordinator and Girls Who Code club facilitator at Sprayberry High School in Marietta, Georgia. She helped make the school the first STEM-certified institution in the district. Hannah is passionate about providing safe spaces for young women to pursue STEM careers. Representation matters is a mantra that Hannah consistently says to her students and is seen in her tireless efforts to support the young women she educates. She received several awards, including the AIC Educator Award Georgia Affiliate winner and the Women of the Year in STEAM Education Award from Women in Technology. And finally, please welcome Dr. Michael Wolf to the stage. Dr. Wolf is an experienced IT professional with a passion for providing STEAM education to underprivileged students. He founded the Minnesota STEM Partnership to address the equity gap in advancing technologies. He spends his spare time volunteering to prepare future leaders by building an AI machine learning ready youth base, aiming to feed the future workforce by developing strong IT and e-business professionals. His life mission is to create opportunities in IT for others through planning, preparation, grit, optimism, and execution. Congratulations again to all three of our Educator National Award winners.
Thank you, Edie, and thank you to our educators. And now we turn to our exciting Future of Tech panel. In the opening, we discussed 15 of the top technology trends. You'll recall the presence of both generative and applied artificial intelligence, immersive reality technologies, and quantum technologies. Expertise about all three of these will be present on this next panel. Also, these panelists bring to bear knowledge about ethics and our responsibility to build a more inclusive future. Now I'd like to introduce Bryndan Moore, the moderator of our panel. Bryndan Moore is an African-American engineer, futurist, and multimedia producer. He explores the nexus of innovation and societal impact through the Black Futurist podcast. With a focus on community-driven initiatives, Bryndan's work spans widely from creating vibrant cafes in Brooklyn to groundbreaking educational television programming. A sought-after content creator and speaker, he collaborates with leading brands and hosts conversations at industry conferences, inspiring action and shaping the future. Bryndan's influence extends beyond his acclaimed podcast, earning him an NAACP Image Award nomination for Official Ignorance, the Death in Custody podcast, and recognition as one of Ebony Magazine's 150 most influential Black individuals in America. As a proud Howard University alum, Bryndan serves on the executive board of the National Alumni Association, further cementing his commitment to shaping tomorrow's leaders. Thank you for being here today, Bryndan.
Turn 6 on, please.
Test one. Hey, good morning. The mic didn't have coffee. The mic had no coffee. Thank you so much for having me. This is my first NC WIT Summit. I'm excited about the conversation that we're about to have. I've met our panelists. They're all incredibly informed, warm, compassionate, generous with their time. And I've asked them, and I'm telling you now, I've asked them to ignore me when possible. If I, as a moderator, my goal is to remove frictions from an otherwise cross conversation between them. So I'm going to take a moment to just read their bios, bring them up to the stage, and ask you to give them a warm welcome. Margaret Martinosi. Margaret Martinosi is an endowed chair, professor of computer science at Princeton University, where she has been on the faculty since 1994. She does research in classical and quantum computer architecture, and she has been recognized as an ACM and IEEE fellow and a member of the NAE. She's also worked extensively on broader service issues, including broadening participation in computing and supporting effective mentoring. Margaret, are you already here? Good morning. Dia Wynn.
Nope, Margaret's sitting down.
Testing. It's not me, I promise. He's responsible for, is the AI lead at AWS, who started and led customer engagement globally on responsible AI. She makes responsible AI practical and accessible. Her focus with organizations is the intentional action of building trust in AI by mitigating risks and uncovering potential unintended impacts related to its development, deployment, and its use. She's met with legislators and policymakers globally to provide perspective to influence imminent regulation and policy on AI. Please welcome Dia Nguyen. Angelique Taylor is an assistant professor of information science at Cornell University. She directs the Artificial Intelligence and Robotics Lab, AIR Lab, which focuses on research at the intersection of robotics, computer vision, and artificial intelligence. AIR Lab Research Lab designs intelligent systems that work alongside groups of people in real-world, safety-critical environments.
Sorry, I'm going rogue.
These systems are realized through community engagement with stakeholders to develop robot vision and planning algorithms and augmented reality systems that support multi-user interactions. Please welcome Angelique Taylor. What did you do to the chair?
Need to be able to see the people I'm talking to.
You know, smart people do smart things. Gia Ramos, a Cornell University undergrad from Gurabo, Puerto Rico, is passionate about tech. She is a Forbes 30 under 30, aiming to make a difference in society through innovation. Gia is an NCWIT Aspirations in Computing National winner and founder of Girl Innovation, focused on empowering young women in tech. Currently, she's an operations analyst at Cornell Debut, a biomedical engineering project team, and has interned at Amazon and Wells Fargo as a software developer engineer. Please welcome Gia. And a great round of applause for our full panel. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's just do quickly as an experiment for our sound team. Just tell us in what city you graduated from high school so we can test your mics.
Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Martinosi. I graduated from high school in just outside Syracuse, New York. But I did go to part of my K through 12 in St. Louis, Missouri, and somehow never made it to this side of Missouri. So I'm happy to finally be in Kansas City.
Very good.
Good morning, I'm Dia Nguyen, and I graduated high school in Suffield, Connecticut, a really small town where I was attending boarding school, but most of my education was in the South Bronx.
Good morning, my name is Angelique Taylor, and I graduated high school in St. Louis, Missouri, born and raised.
Got some locals.
Good morning, my name is Giamar Ramos, and I graduated high school in San Juan, Puerto Rico, and I was born and raised there pretty much, so.
Fantastic. So you all heard everything, right? We're good?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So we're going to start with the benefits, some definitions and some benefits, okay, of the technologies we're talking about today. So you will help me to define what we're talking about, and then we'll talk about the benefits before we get into some of the larger questions, okay? High level, what is quantum computing, and what is its promise of development, and potential?
Great, so that's diving right in. So quantum computing is basically a new way of thinking about computing in which instead of bits that are either 1 or 0, you have qubits, quantum bits, that are a possible superposition of states. So basically a probability distribution instead of just an answer. And based on that, you can think about computing in ways that are sort of massively more parallel than our traditional computers. The promise is to make certain problems that have been intractable, literally cannot be solved in our lifetimes, and make them tractable. And that can be applied to a range of things. People are worried about it being applied to crypto, and that gets into the news a lot. But on the plus side, actually, one of the humble opportunities that we have is that quantum computing is viewed as possibly very influential in catalyst design for chemistry, which in turn can help us build better fertilizers, which in turn can help us feed people more effectively. So that's just one of many examples. The promise is to make things that haven't been computable possible in our lifetimes and faster.
That's very good. That's a very good answer. Does anyone else want to add anything to that answer? Okay, great.
mean, her example, her description was perfect.
How do you foresee the integration of AI and quantum computing reshaping industries in the next decade?
Well, certainly I can jump in here. I think, what Margaret was just describing in terms of its capability to be able to solve problems that were previously unattainable, it is expected to be what underpins some of the AI advancement in the future. When we think about AI today currently solving some unattainable problems, but then having the force behind it of quantum, that takes what we believe is unattainable to the next level. And so she was just talking about chemistry, but we've also been seeing considerations around just in terms of drug, creation and what that could do for, in implied cases for cancer and other drugs or other diseases that haven't been, solved for and that we don't have cures for. So the two of them combined is expected to be, a triple force, of course, with considerations for some of the threats as well. But what people are excited about is this opportunity for us to see things that have been challenging us today actually resolved.
Okay. In what ways can advancements in robotics and extended reality devices enhance? It's not a great question. It's not a great next question. Let's not do that. Let's move forward.
Can I add something to Dia's answer, which is the other opportunity is to be present at the beginning or at an inflection point. To me, that's so exciting. There's this huge inflection point that we're seeing in AI. The way we do computing could fundamentally change in the next, 10 years maybe? You guys know better than I. And then quantum, similarly, present at the creation. So for everyone here who's dealing with young people, which is a lot of us, to kind of convey that potential, that's huge.
I love what you described about this, and this probably connects to a little bit of what Gia works on in terms of her advocacy and programming. But the opportunity that this creates, right, at this early stage. And one of the things that I think is important as we talk about some of the impact or considerations or promise is, in fact, the opportunity, if we can get other individuals, especially those from underserved and underrepresented communities, excited about the potential and actually provide resources, access, so that they can be a part of what is going to be a future, in these areas.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about letting them know what is out there at the end of the day. Once you get them to kind of see this is an opportunity or this is something you could get involved in, and you see the spark in their eyes of oh my God, that is so cool. That's pretty much just the first step, I would say, yeah.
The other cool bit, so to kind of plug in the question that you were getting towards, I think we underestimate how much virtual and extended reality is currently being used by students and young people already. And it is now helping them to translate and understand the potential that creates beyond just the games that they play, right? Because they live in that world currently, but what other opportunity then is possible when we start to take that out of just, the game situation into the real world?
Yeah, let me jump, please.
Yeah, I can jump in right here. So
I'll try to set that up for you.
Yeah, thank you. So typically when I think about AI, I think about either embodied AI or unembodied AI, right? So when we think about embodied AI, we think about robots. So robots can take physical actions in their environment. And the promise behind robotics is that, we can use robots as a way of not replacing skilled workers, but to augment human capabilities, to figure out the various challenges that people encounter in the workplace, in their daily life, and trying to build robots to help address some of those challenges and improve human experiences. And when you think about unembodied AI, we think about things like large language models, like maybe you're interacting with this AI from a computer, that's kind of situated in your environment. And the promise behind these types of technologies is that, especially with large language models, you can use these technologies to help you with writing tasks, with problem solving, with in education, right? And so there's a lot of opportunities for these types of technologies to help all kinds of people from all various disciplines. And so I think that's gotten a lot of people very excited about these technologies. And I think that there's a lot of potential to figure out ways of using them to, again, improve human experiences.
Fantastic. We have a rough outline, but as I hear you all talk, I'm tempted more and more to go way off script and just ask questions. We've all experienced the pandemic in different ways. I clearly remember we still had issues during the pandemic of just providing internet access to children, to students around the United States. And it's an issue that we've talked about extensively since then, and certain companies have gotten behind efforts to really increase that. So access is my next question. I have kids, they're digital natives, right? Their whole context is different than mine and my wife's and my parents'. And that idea, overlaid with this one, we have these incredible technologies we're talking about. How do we create access for participation for our young people?
I want to share something because you just mentioned, your children being digital natives and that being different than our experience, and how valuable and important access is. And I'll use this in the context of my personal experience. So in the 3rd grade, I received a computer for having the highest reading and math scores on some standardized test. And my family were a family of teachers, and we had one nurse. She was like the professional in the family. So in the 3rd grade, 8 years old, I decided I was going to be a computer engineer. I don't have any context for it, and I can't remember why I said computer engineer, because I promise you, I don't know what that was. And my family didn't know what that was. They were all like, okay, yeah, great, whatever that is, and tried to support me the best, but it was because of that computer. And of course, we have more computing power in our pockets than we did at that time. I had a Commodore VIC-20 for any of you that kind of can go that way back. But it was that access for me, right? This opportunity that exposed and created a new world and new prospect for me that actually led me to go to school, study computer science and computer engineering dual degree. I'm not technically a computer engineer, I'm more a computer scientist, and now I sort of focus on AI. But that was my path, and so that exposure, right? That access to the technology is what created a new opportunity and something completely different than I had ever been exposed to or in my family. So when you talk about access, I think we have to think about it beyond just, and I talk about this a lot as it relates to responsible AI as well, because part of that in certain regions means that we have to first start with the basics, right? Are we providing internet access? Are we doing some of the fundamental things to get people basic computer skills so that we can then transition them to understanding what potential there is with AI? And in certain environments, we absolutely have to start there and build programming and focus in that way. And one thing just in the way of internet, I work for Amazon Web Services, and we have a Project Kuiper that is focused on bringing internet access via satellite to, communities and areas where we traditionally don't have. And that's an example for me, and one of the ways that we're, looking to invest. Or trying to provide AI-ready program is a program that's seeking to provide education and AI education. 29 million we're committed to in the next couple of years, but with the intention of bringing access to individuals educationally as well, so that they can be exposed to that opportunity.
Yeah, I think it's all about just access and how do you get there. Personally, I wasn't born and wanted to be into CS. It very much was brought up by my dad. When I was in 5th grade, my dad secretly put me into a robotics summer camp. I thought I was going to take crime investigation. That was not the case. So I pretty much got there, and it was just me, one other girl, and then 11 guys in the room. And it was super intimidating. All of the guys had previous robotics experience. The girl and I had never touched a robot before. And then I ended up finding out that I loved computer science. I loved coding the robot and kind of getting it to do all the little challenges they would make us do. And really, if it wasn't for my dad, I mean, he was already in the CS space. If it wasn't for him pushing me there, I don't know if I would have just gone and said, I'm going to try out robotics, I'm going to try out coding. And I think a lot of the times it's just about getting that push or just knowing what's out there. And that's kind of what I work with Girl Innovation, one of the program that I founded. Pretty much the main thing I do is advocacy, just letting girls know what's out there. So pretty much what we do in the summer program is we teach them basics in coding. We start with Scratch and like block programming and just kind of getting them interested in it or just letting them know what's out there. I think that's pretty much the main thing, yeah.
Yeah, I'd add access. So that's like the underpinning of being able to get to the right technologies. And then the pathfinders that can help with a sense of belonging, that it's not just that you can access it, but that you're welcome here, this is yours, you have a sense of agency, and really instilling that in young people, especially young people who don't look out and see themselves in the crowd of people doing this profession. That's so important. If I want to inject one piece of optimism from COVID, and we won't know yet if it's founded or not, but an awful lot of people who were like muddling along with computers, at home, trying to deal with that. I wonder if any of them were inspired to go into computing to make it better for next time, and or just for general use, right?
No, next time.
Sorry. And so like this notion that maybe there were pinpoints of inspiration in that challenge, that gives me some hope for the future too.
Yeah, and that storytelling is kind of why I do some of the stuff I do, is being able to just give people access to other people's reasons, like why. And I'm showing my age here. My dad was a huge ham radio fan, ham radio operator, and my brother and I, when we were coming up, he would try to get us to get our license, and it was a big thing in our household. And we would sit there and listen to his conversations to people all around the world, and they didn't talk about anything to me. I was like, I don't want to do this. You guys don't talk about anything. I didn't have a why, but being able to find people who are passionate about a reason to get involved in any of these technologies and telling those stories is a big deal, and will move us forward. I'd like to move us towards navigating ethical challenges in tech development. Okay? What are some of the potential ethical dilemmas that may arise from the widespread adoption of AI, quantum computing, robotics, et cetera?
I would love to start this conversation off. So in my research lab, we do a lot of work focused on designing technologies to support healthcare workers in particular. And our work involves using human-centered design techniques to engage with stakeholders to understand early on and throughout our design process, what are the various concerns that stakeholders have? Not only like what are the challenges that these technologies can help address, but like what are people actually thinking about these technologies, and how should we kind of incorporate that within the design of these technologies before we start building them? Oftentimes this is an afterthought. And this has led to a lot of challenges with users adopting various robotics technologies, especially in healthcare settings. And so a lot of the concern is around, job displacement. It's around, I really need to maintain my autonomy, and I don't want a robot to get in my way or to try to stop me from doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And so that's kind of led my research down a path where, we're really trying to focus on identifying those problems that robots are good at and that humans need to absolutely work on, and robots should not touch this task, right? Because at the end of the day, the healthcare workers are skilled workers. They've gone to school, they've been trained, they typically have to go through clinicals. A robot is something that's kind of pre-programmed. The research is about how we can adapt these technologies to people in real world settings, but we have a long way to go, right? And so it's very important that, we really engage with stakeholders and try to understand how these technologies might affect them in the workplace.
Well, this is sort of the area that I focus on the most. And actually, I probably shouldn't say that I focus on the most, because I actually try to think about and help people have a greater understanding of what the promise is in spite of some of the challenges. I think that we've unfortunately media has done a disservice to like technology and AI, and in particular AI and robotics, because everybody generally, when we talk about AI and some of the challenges, they automatically think of what?
Star Trek.
Exactly, the robots are going to kill us, right? And so, and everywhere I go, like there are tons of people that will come to me and go like, no, really, like, are they going to kill us? Like,
Storytelling.
And the reality, and I heard a comedian say this, I won't say exactly the way he said it, but a comedian was just talking about we have to be more concerned about people, like the technology in the hands of people, and in particular he talked about stupid people, but people that have different interests, right, or that are driven by different motivations other than the common good, right, other than ensuring that we have systems and technology that benefit all. So, but unfortunately, what we hear about oftentimes is like a lot of the bad, a lot of the issues. So things like, we're thinking about traditional or classical AI we're thinking about like the bias, or the fact that systems and its data and the people responsible for those systems are biased, and that gets infused into the systems that could cause harm or disadvantage for people, and in particular underserved or underrepresented, because we have majority population that is building the systems that don't have the perspective, that don't have the lived experience of those, so they're not considering that in the design of the systems. When we think about things around privacy and just like where we're getting data and how that data is being used, and if it was consented for the specific use that it's now being used in, and how our individual rights being protected as it relates to that. You use security. I mean, what we now have in the way of AI, and certainly generative AI, is making infiltration and security issues, like from a cybersecurity perspective, much more challenging, right? And so people are concerned about that. What do we do? And generative AI is providing us benefit in some sense, like being able to tackle some of the challenges and being much smarter about how we secure our environments, but also creating challenge as well. Generative AI, which we've been hearing about since the advent of that application that put the technology in the hands of everyone, is now introducing additional challenges over and above those, right? Questions of intellectual property and copyright and the fact that it does not provide realistic responses or accurate responses all the time. Hallucinations, that's the word I was thinking of. I talk about it more like it's very much like humans, right? Because we lie. We don't always tell the truth. So it doesn't always tell the truth. But like those are considerations now when we start to think about like, can we trust the technology in addition to job displacement and those sort of considerations. So we have a wide number of concerns that we need to be much more intentional about how we address those in early stages of design so that we can build systems that are ultimately for us and not being done to us.
If I can step in for 1 second, the word that came to mind was credibility. As the difference between a human who lies and my AI who's giving me back, what credibility do we as the user give to each respective party? And that's something that we've got to talk about. Is like, just asking my AI model to give me something back historically I've given it credibility. The answer that comes back from my search engine is correct to some extent. And so we've got to find ways of discussing that, because I don't think there's any policy or any way that we can solve that as a rule. We've got to be making sure the people understand credibility matters.
And I think it goes back to sort of this, with the advancement of generative AI and the way in which we've been using those applications, there's certainly concern. When we start thinking about other uses in the business context, most people are not just grabbing, ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, and just using that in that fashion. Although most people, oftentimes when they come to us, they go like, okay, we want to use generative AI, and they start thinking about that application alone. That's an application and one particular use case or example of a use for that. But when we start looking at that in business context, it's slightly different. But the thing that we often try to emphasize, and this goes back to what you were saying about augmenting human capability, we still have to be critical thinkers. We still need to trust and verify, right? In some cases, we don't want to leave or resign too much ownership responsibility to the systems and not, keep our perspective engaged.
So I wanted to build on this notion of credibility. So, I mean, in the research community, there's a notion of trustworthy AI. There's a notion of explainable AI. So these are things that people are very actively working on. Thank you. And we need more of that. I think often if you open up the newspaper today, or open up the newspaper app today, what you see is, forgive me, it's a somewhat corporate view of what AI is doing to us, and it's a view that is consolidated in fewer and fewer players that have more and more of the sort of the market, if you will. And for us as a society to kind of get through this, there needs to be democratized access to AI innovation. And so that means making sure that the research funding is available to have folks outside of the fewer and fewer companies that can actually access and shape where we go with this. It means getting data and compute resources broadly available so that anyone in this room can advance AI. And it means making sure that we're all in the conversation. The US set up an AI Safety Institute board. The board members were announced about a month ago. What is it? 21 CEOs and 1 academic. And whether you like academics or not, you know, that probably isn't the right mix.
You're absolutely right.
And so kind of keeping an eye on that and making sure we insist on inclusion of all different dimensions, I think will be important.
I love that you said a thing that actually got them to participate and clap, right? So, as mentioned earlier, I have a podcast called The Black Futurist, and it is a podcast, a series of discussions with incredibly smart people, and the whole podcast is one question with every episode. So I'm going to ask you all the same question. When you are wildly successful at your work, how does that change our society 25 years from now, 25 years down the line? I'd like to start with Gia.
Yeah.
I think one of the main successes for what I do with Girl Innovation is just kind of getting the girls really interested. I had this one student, her name was Camila, and she was my first student. I love her. So I started out basically teaching her basics in robotics, and she just automatically was into it. She saw it and something clicked in her. So after I got her into the mentorship program, I got her involved with NCWIT, actually. So she was an honorable mention. And then just kind of seeing how her growth in technology and how much she was into it. Now she's actually studying engineering at university, which is so great. I love to see that. But yeah, I think success for me is just knowing that I've reached them, you know, getting these students to really be interested in it. And even if they're not, if they say, hey, maybe it's not for me, at least I know they were able to see it and they were able to experience it and make that choice within themselves.
Thank you.
So success for me is kind of two-pronged, right? So one is kind of technology focused. So how can we build intelligent systems that can improve human experiences? So as I mentioned, I focused a lot on healthcare settings. And for me, you know, tangible goals include, you know, figuring out ways that these technologies can help improve teamwork, can help prevent medical errors, and ultimately can help improve patient outcomes. And that's what I want to do on a technology side. On the human side, I want to help educate healthcare workers about these various technologies because they tend to be kind of low tech literacy. And it's very important for me to, you know, help them, educate them on how these technologies work, how they can potentially help in their various workflows.
So just pause it for 1 second. I want you both to readdress just the final part. So when you are wildly successful at it, how is our society different? What is the outcome of your work given over the passing of time? What does a society look like differently when you're the...
We want to save people, we want to save lives.
Very good.
Period.
All right. Thank you.
So for me, and this goes back to something you mentioned earlier, and this was that AI is no longer a bridge, or isn't a bridge. AI and emerging technology is not a barrier, but a bridge for everyone being empowered to be, to see and reach their full potential, and for us to build a more equitable world. And because I believe that what we have in this technology is a great opportunity in front of us where we can actually level the playing field, where we can provide access and resources and experiences and ways for those, particularly that have been underserved, to now have opportunity. And so I see this as an opportunity to level the playing field. And if I'm wildly successful, that means that businesses and organizations and institutions are actually thinking about much more intentionally about the ways in which they design, use, and deploy the services. Because it's not just about the design part or just about what we do in implementation, but that's also equitable deployment or responsible deployment. That means that we don't build systems or technology, or even in healthcare, where it works and it's designed well with consideration for all populations, but then certain populations don't get access to it because of the ways in which we allocate resources. So deployment as well is important. And then ultimately it would mean that I don't have a job in responsible AI or as a tech ethicist, but it's integrated into the way in which we work. Right? We just build responsibly. We just build trustworthy. And there's no need for a separate work stream and a separate set of resources. It's just the way in which we do business.
Great answer. Thank you.
So I guess I have the benefit of going last. Thank you. I guess my answer is I hope we get it right this time. So I'm inspired by, if you go back and look at computing in the 1940s when it was first new. In the US, the men were off at war, and so they find some ragtag collection of women mathematicians, bring them in. Some of them are doing crypto. Some of them, it's like, oh, this is typing, so this must be secretarial, so let's have a woman do it, right? I mean, the only women in the picture are in those kinds of veins and with that kind of a mindset. But as we sort of hit this inflection point with AI, with quantum, there is a point of reinvention right now. We have the chance to do it right this time. And I really hope that in 25 years, society looks different because computing looks different because we got it right this time.
Thank you. Stepping off script. There's a show that, I'm a huge science fiction nerd. There's a show called For All Mankind on Apple Plus. Have you seen that?
No.
Has anyone seen For All Mankind? Yeah. So what For All Mankind does is it goes back in history, space race, right? And it makes one variable change, and it's not so obvious. It's not written into the synopsis of the show. The one change they make in this show, which I know you'll love, is what happens if women's voices are at the table. That's the one change in that whole show. And then you have over time how our society is completely different when women's voices are at the table starting in the mid-60s. It's an incredible show, and I love the idea that storytelling changes our society in that way, which is why I got involved in it. You should just all be aware that this thing exists, and I'm hoping that when that show is widely adopted and widely successful, and people are really watching and aware of what the storytelling is really saying, that it changes how we address problems today.
It's interesting you bring that up because one of the examples anybody that's heard me, I often use, and we talk about this in the context of seatbelts, just to give a good perception or perspective of this. In the 1950s, when seatbelts were created, 80% of the drivers were men. So they were designed based on the physique, et cetera, of men, and they were tested. And this was a technology that was intended with good intentions to help reduce the number of deaths and injuries in vehicular accidents. The researchers or the scientists at the time that were helping create it, all of those were men, and so there wasn't a voice or perspective of women. There was no consideration for the 20% of the drivers that were women. There weren't any consideration for the other stakeholders, the children that were in the car. And so what we found, and you can go look at all of the research and other studies, they've talked about the number of injuries, the increased likelihood to injury for women, even today, that women are more likely to have concussions, et cetera, because of the way in which the seatbelts, retract. But the other thing is that it's taken us years to actually have requirements for us to be able to test and design seatbelts that, on dummies, for women that are adjusted for women. So that voice and perspective, right, of women were not considered. They weren't in the room, and we have something that had good intention in its design that had an unintended consequence of harm. And it's taken us a number of years to be able to even walk that back or address it. And so what you talked about in terms of like, can we learn and do it right? These are the kinds of things that the voice and perspective, and thinking about not just the primary consumer, right? Because the primary consumer were men. So you could say that was right to design it for the 80%. We often do that 80-20. But with systems like this, that implication is huge. And so we can't just think about like the primary consumer. We have to think about all of the stakeholders. That's one of the things that human-centered design helps us do, right? And also considering other stakeholders. The children weren't drivers, but they were impacted by the technology. We have to pay attention to them as well. And that kind of voice and perspective, having that inclusion, because I'm sure if there was perhaps a woman, and also empowered, right, had a sense of belonging, could feel like I could bring a voice and perspective that would alter the system or alter the way in which we design this.
I'd love to hear your thoughts on healthcare, because healthcare comes to mind to me as a place where making sure that there's inclusion in the...
Incredibly challenging.
Yes, definitely. So that was actually one of the first projects that kind of got me into the healthcare space, trying to figure out ways of integrating robots into clinical teams. And one of the first kind of things I've learned about this space is that, nurses are primary patient advocates. They spend the most time with patients. Yet, when it comes to actually treating the patient at the bedside, their voices are often mitigated, right? They call this speech mitigation, when they often identify mistakes of physicians who tend to be men. They are often kind of shut down and penalized for it. The penalization comes at the end, right? Where if, for example, a nurse says, hey, this patient might contract an infection because I've been observing them since they got here, and what you're about to do might present a risk to this patient. If the physician kind of goes ahead and doesn't listen to this nurse, this patient can then contract infection. The patient then gets sick, right? And then they have to stay in the hospital longer. This actually costs the hospital money. And then the nurse gets written up because they didn't identify this mistake ahead of time, but they did. And so this is a cultural problem. I don't know if anybody's ever watched Grey's Anatomy, but it's like this situation on steroids. And so this happens all the time, and it's kind of ingrained within the culture of healthcare. And so trying to figure out ways of designing technologies to really address this cultural problem has been something that I've been pursuing for over like 6 years now. It's a really hard problem. People are very resistant to change. And then the topic of so do you really think that a physician is going to listen to a doctor? I'm sorry. Do you really think that a physician is going to listen to a robot when they try to give them some instructions? Or if they tell them like, hey, like what you're doing might present a patient safety risk. I think since the recent advances in AI, I think that they've become less resistant because they are seeing the potential of these technologies. But I'm not totally convinced, right? I feel like it's kind of 50-50, so I'm always running interviews and studies with physicians, nurses, nurse practitioners, all types of stakeholders in the hospital. More recently, we've even started to engage with EMTs, trying to understand patient flows from coming from a EMT to like intake to being treated at the bedside. And this problem happens at every stage of the workflow. And so, yeah, we have a lot of problems to address. We have a long way to go. But I think that these technologies do have the potential to help. It's just a matter of also trying to kind of change people's mindset in a way, right?
I love what she mentioned about the mindset change, right? Because that's actually the hardest part of this. Like, we can figure out some of the technology, and the other bit of this is, speaking to data and some of the challenges we have with this historical data and the historical context and things sort of getting embedded systemically into even like your mindset being embedded into the data that drives some of the systems. But the hardest part of this is the people piece of it, right? It is, as you said, changing hearts and minds, because in many ways we have to shift people's focus to be much more conscious and aware of the need to bring in the voice and perspective, or even to be open to, as you said, that what the technology could offer. You reminded me, you said Grey's Anatomy, I was thinking of Chicago Med, right? There was a recent sort of episode where they were using like robotic, the AI was making recommendations, and the doctor was like, no, like this is, and in one case it was a good recommendation, in another case it was not. But being able to help educate them, we don't want them to leave their education, their experience at the door, but also be open to that, because there are places where, the systems can be less biased than we are as human beings. And we've been dealing with that for hundreds, thousands of years, right? So how do we unpack that? How do we help people understand their own individual biases and be willing to disrupt those so they can be open to perspective, right? To change the way in which we're designing tech. And that's not the easiest. You've been hearing about some of that stuff even over the course of the last day, but we have to continue to do that work.
The word that comes to mind is trust. How does that word play into your work? And I'm sure there's multiple different ways you can use it. So please talk about it in terms of data set or however you might hear it.
Did you?
No,
Okay. So this has actually been a really big topic in the human-robot interaction field. So that's my home field of research. And, we've observed that a lot of times, especially people that have never engaged with a robot before, when you put a robot in front of them, they tend to overtrust this robot. They tend to think it can do all these great things that it was not programmed to do. And, this has turned into a field of research where people are trying to figure out ways to calibrate human trust, such that people have more realistic views of like what the robot can and cannot do. I mean, like, one way of doing that is just to like tell them like, hey, the robot cannot do this, the robot can do that. But you won't always, like, HRI researcher won't always be there to be able to tell you that. And so how does a robot communicate this information? This is still an open problem, still an open field of research. This is still something we're trying to figure out. But yeah, this is a really big problem. And this is happening a lot with generative AI, right? Yeah. Margaret, you mentioned that a lot of the headlines are coming from all these business folks who, don't even have the technical background to know like how these large language models were even programmed. Yet they are telling us about the future of these technologies and all the great things they can do. Do you really know? Are you overselling this? And so we also have to calibrate human trust in AI. Right, because that's a really big problem. And Divya mentioned, the Terminator example. This is another example of, people kind of taking the sci-fi movies and placing it on the technologies that they see in real settings. Like, all right, all of that was fake, And so trying to calibrate trust is an ongoing problem. Whether it's embodied or unembodied AI, it's still something that we have a lot of work to do.
Well, I mean, I can give the student perspective to the trust that some students have with generative AI. I mean, I personally have used it. Sometimes I'm in a math class and I want it to explain a formula to me. And there's times that it explains it incorrectly, but I go back and I look at the textbook, I compare the two, I'm like, hey, this one got this right, or it explained this a little bit better, more in depth, but in the textbook it says it this way. So how much can you trust it? And I feel like, at least with my generation, we've had technology our whole lives. So we have this trust that we were almost born with, essentially, that we've always been involved with tech, we've always seen it, we've seen it grow. And it's kind of just like, how far can you trust it? Because I know people that they go into generative AI, they ask a question, and they're like, yep, that is the truth. That is what I've been learning. That is 100% it. And it's just kind of like also learning that, yes, you can use AI to help you out and maybe explain something better, but having the thought of checking it, double checking it, maybe looking at what was written in the textbook. It's kind of interesting to see the different generations and how much they do trust AI versus,
So I'm going to go a little nerdy for a moment, but so I'm a hardware person. 30 years ago, roughly, Intel had this problem that the folks at Mathematica were doing some deep calculations, and they realized that a whole bunch of Intel microprocessors divided incorrectly in a very narrow and constrained context. And Intel initially tried to say, no worries, because most of you aren't dividing in that way, and you don't need the precision that that company Mathematica was looking at it at, so don't worry about it. That didn't work. In the end, Intel had to do a massive recall of these processors, refabricate them with a divider that worked correctly, and send them out. And it spurred, both for Intel and for the industry as a whole, dramatic uptake in the use of what's called formal verification to test designs as they go through the design process and before they actually get fabricated in silicon, to get closer and closer to the holy grail of bug-free designs. In the years since then, actually, this field of formal verification has blossomed. It used to be one of the intractable problems, the kind of thing that we'd need a quantum computer to solve, but it is actually getting better and better at a rate that's faster than some of the other scaling trends like Moore's Law in our field. And formal verification is something that is increasingly used in software verification and hardware now. And there's a hope that, Gia mentioned kind of trust but verify, with the human doing the verify, but you can also imagine in some settings being able to set up scaffolding where we have automated verification alongside some AI system or some quantum system to do some of this more automated mathematical verification. And so I have hope that it's not all going to be solved by technology, but I have hope that we have some tools in our toolkit that we can deploy on some of this.
I love what you said, Margaret, because that is some of the stuff that I'm seeing as well in the corporate context. And when
Amazon uses it a lot now.
Yes, yeah. Yes. So we actually, and we do a little bit of, we're seeing more of having a separate generative AI system that is helping to test and verify systems as well. But the thing that you make me think about really is in part education, like education awareness that's necessary. So I have two sons, both teenagers. And on a regular basis, I am told that TikTok is true, and it knows well beyond any reasonable doubt, whatever they've read or whatever they've watched on TikTok is absolutely, the truth. And it's, in their opinion, a trusted resource. And we certainly are hearing about that in the news as well, with considerations about what we do with that technology. But my sons and that generation, right, they believe what they see, right? They believe what they hear. And as part of the work, in addition to what we can do, technology or technically in terms of the verification of systems to make technology much more trustable, right, and accurate, there is a necessity for us to also address education and awareness so that we can continue to help people understand what truly is capable, what the systems truly are capable of doing, as well as what that means. And so I talk to them all the time, like anybody, I mean, we're in the world of the knowledge economy and content creators. I could create anything I want. And now we have technology to do that. So you can't trust everything, right? And helping them, get greater awareness with that. I think the other bit for me in terms of the work that I do is we talk about responsible AI, responsible innovation being a foundation of trust, right? When we do the things as an organization, when we have tenets that drive the way that we're implementing, when we put in practice things to make sure that we're bringing in the voice and perspective of those that are underrepresented or served, that when we consider all of the stakeholders, when we are doing the things necessary around security and privacy, and then we have the accountability structures and transparency in place to be able to share with people, like, this is what we're doing, this is our commitment, this is what our work looks like, and can also be honest about some of the challenges that still exist and the research and work that we're doing to hopefully solve those. That kind of transparency, that kind of practice, which is all elements of responsible AI, I think helps us also to build trust. And that trust is not just in the organization itself or in that business or in that product, but also in the technology.
Education. I know we have a lot of educators in the room. All the educators, clap your hands or something. Let us know you're actually here. Okay, great. In your respective technologies and fields, how well are we doing at creating access down the educational chain? How are we doing in terms of providing laboratories at university? Is there any access or introduction to concepts on the high school level? How far down the chain are we doing a great job, or at least a good job, at creating access points and awareness of the potential to participate in these technologies that you focus on?
Well, I mean, I can speak on both college and high school perspective. At least in my university, it is, in terms of gender equality, I would say it's pretty 50-50. Cornell does a really good job at that. But when we go back to my high school, my little sister, she's right now taking an honors robotics class, and she is the only girl enrolled. And this is probably a class of maybe 18 students. So it's still, I would say, at least where I'm from, it's still pretty jarring to kind of see how big the gender gap is. I mean, I love to work toward that and kind of just trying to help the gap, but I think there is still, at least in those young ages, there's a stigma that CS or tech is not cool, or, oh, robotics is nerdy, it's for guys, that type of idea that it's kind of hard to still break down. At least now there's more advocacy for it, I would definitely say that, but I still think there is a lot of work that needs to be done to take that stigma away from CS and technology.
So I can talk about this in a couple of ways. So I both work on some projects as a part of the work that we do at Amazon and Amazon Web Services, as well as like on a personal level, engage in this in a number of ways. Because I know, again, you all heard me share a little bit about my experience as being a student from the South Bronx, like not having exposure and how valuable it meant. But I also recognize that I didn't see people that looked like me at any point in my career. I just recently had a woman manager after 25 years in technology, right? So I am very, very involved in projects because I realize that kind of exposure access is necessary so that they can also see themselves like you're describing, Gia. There are a couple of programs, and I'll use this as an example. I say there's a lot more work that needs to be done, as Gia was describing, in terms of advocacy, in terms of making sure that we are creating opportunities from a workforce perspective, as well as in our organizations to be able to provide access. And I think that that's something that we can do in business, in society, but also from a government perspective as well, like having greater investment in these areas. We have things like Amazon Future Engineer, Amazon Ahead. All of these are programs that start in middle school and go through high school and even to college in terms of internships, but they actually work towards providing early access to technology. Cloud Connect is something that they have, like bringing education and cloud and technology education to organizations. I just spent Saturday with 300 or so students that are going to be a part of a program that is going over the course of the next several months. We'll be working along with a partnership in order to learn technology, but also have Amazon mentors. There's an organization called Jobs of the Future that I am an advisory member of that is looking at the ways in which we can engage and create workforce programming that helps to provide more equitable access as well as opportunities for meaningful income in the future, like all of those things. And I think it requires the continued partnership of academia, private industry, as well as government to create these. And it should be part of our overall strategy. It is for AWS in terms of how we look at responsible AI and responsible innovation, not just providing access to the technology, but education and investing in the next generation of technologists. Right, that's part of our strategy. It needs to be a part of the strategy of much more.
I want you to know that Gia's whole face lit up when you started mentioning some of your programs. So obviously she's got some experience with that. You must be doing a great job.
Yeah, so I can actually speak personally toward it. I'm an Amazon Future Engineer Ambassador, so I
did not know that. Look at that.
So I actually won the award in senior year of high school, and honestly, that program.
Applause.
No, and when I tell you that program has probably changed my entire trajectory throughout college, I mean, it helped me with, a lot of students probably relate, imposter syndrome. It helped me completely with that. It gave me industry experience. It took away the fear I had of going into industry. I mean, when I was in senior year and I found out that I was going to be working at Amazon, I was so scared. I was terrified. And honestly, it just gave so much mentorship. It gave me so much security and just experience overall. And just the other students that were also involved with the program have just been so inspirational. They're all from so many different backgrounds. Some just started in CS right at the internship itself. And it's incredible to see how students have grown through these types of programs. And I really do hope that other corporations kind of do the same thing or expand on that.
I know a number of the technology companies that all have like investments and programs similar to this, but I think to your broader question, it's still something that needs to be a priority across the board, especially as we think about the ways in which technology is advancing and moving, because we want the voice and perspective to help influence the systems of tomorrow.
Can
Yes,
I rep
please.
a little bit for quantum? So the U.S. has a national quantum initiative. It was just renewed for another, I think it goes in 3-year chunks. One of the things that does is it has sort of encouraged research funding, but it also encouraged the formation of a committee to create a curriculum called the Q12 curriculum. So Q12 like K-12, but for quantum. And it talks about kind of different grade level appropriate ways to bring little bits of quantum into primary school and high school education settings. And so I think that's pretty neat. But the other thing that I wanted to mention was that quantum is, I think, quite remarkable in the way that there are cloud-connected resources that are publicly available. So you can go to IBM Quantum Learning, and literally this afternoon you could write a little quantum computing program and run it on a teeny tiny quantum computer online, or your kindergartner can do it. Like it's that available. And so to that sense of access that we were talking about earlier and the sense of belonging, it is both access, you can log in and start working on it, and a sense of belonging because there are different programmatics and curriculum that are built around it. At a more advanced level, I will also give a shout out. So at NSF, when I was there, we created opportunities for folks to get supplemental funding to use cloud-connected resources from IBM, from AWS, and from Microsoft in the quantum space, basically to help researchers who had an idea but didn't have much quantum background start on-ramping and use the publicly available resources as an add-on. And so I'm happy to see there's sort of access and inclusion at the human level, that's important, and then making sure people have the resources to go and see themselves like hands-on doing it is another aspect of it.
100%. That's very good.
And I can speak to some programs at Cornell. So for those not familiar, so I'm at Cornell Tech, and Cornell Tech is in New York City on Roosevelt Island. It's a graduate campus, so we have master's and PhD students. And so one thing that I'm really excited about on our campus is ways to engage with undergraduates since they're not around most of the year. And so Cornell Tech has what we call a Breakthrough AI program, which is a program primarily for women or underrepresented people from underrepresented groups, where you basically can learn about the basics of fundamental machine learning algorithms, so clustering, regression, classification, deep learning, and then at the end of the program, they actually match you with a Cornell Tech faculty member to actually work on a research project. And oftentimes these students kind of come out of the program with like a publication, and so it's a really great program and also helps students prepare for jobs in AI once they graduate. Also, because we are a graduate campus, myself and a lot of the other faculty try to find ways to engage with students from underrepresented groups over the summer for research for experiences for undergraduates. And so for those that are interested, check out the CRA distributed DREU program. We just recently piloted a Cornell external program for REU students where external undergraduate students can come into Cornell to actually do REUs with Cornell faculty. So yeah, check out the Cornell Tech website. We have a lot of great programs. We also engage with K through 12 students over the summer. The director of K through 12 engagement, Diane Levette, directs that at Cornell Tech, and she does a great job, and she really keeps the campus vibrant over the summer with all these kids that are coming over to learn about various technologies, and they're engaging in various tech workshops. So.
Great. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, questions change the world.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to start steering this conversation. We are in our last 15 minutes, and yes, if you raise your hand, someone will come and give you the opportunity to speak.
Good morning, and thank you guys for coming. This has been absolutely riveting. My name is Anita Robinson. I work for Bank of America, and I am in cybersecurity. So, one of the things that you touched on that I have become very passionate over in the past year is intentional design, and especially from a financial institution and from the position of cybersecurity where we look at threats. A lot of times things are created because they're really great ideas, but we didn't understand that this could be exploited in a certain way. For example, Waze. Waze lets us get around all the way, but we didn't know that it's going to take you through neighborhoods that weren't meant to have traffic, to cause car accidents, to get people, to maybe lose their life or whatever because Waze is taken through a path it never went through. So that's unintentional consequences. One of the things that, and I've never seen a real framework for intentional design, but you speak about it. So in the military, whenever they would create tanks to go out, they have design from cradle to the grave, and any way that it can be exploited, so if somebody captured that tank, it couldn't be used against us. How can we, as a technology community, work to think more about intentional design, especially with regards to AI, because of course AI is what you feed it. Garbage in, garbage out. So how can we think more consciously, or should we come together for a framework for intentional design in our future?
Thank you. Unintentional consequences. Go.
Yeah, so I mean, there are a number of things I think you could look at. When I work with customers, and when I started work with customers in 2020, there wasn't like NIST, which provides a risk management framework, what is coming out of the IEEE and ISO, which are all organizations that are looking at set of standards that can be leveraged. But at the time, we didn't have that. So I created what I would believe is a framework and a structure that allowed us to be able to walk customers through the areas of potential risk as well as areas of unintended impact. And so the framework looked at 7 or 8 different areas, all of which were, value alignment, like considering where this particular use case aligns with the mission, vision, values of the organization. And we overlook that sometimes and we make assumptions, but the output of our systems can violate right, in ways, and so actually having some intentionality in terms of reviewing that. We would look at inclusion, right? How are we including the voice and perspective of all stakeholders, not just the primary consumers, and then help us to make a much more informed decision about the ways in which we design, because you still may decide that you're not going to handle something for the 1%, but that you're intentional about that. And we would do things in human-centered design to look at like not only personas that we wanted to serve, but also anti-personas, because that's also an area where if we don't intend to serve a certain population, whether that is any slice of the demographic, that's often where unintended consequence comes up, right? And then we would look at other things around accountability, privacy, security and safety, transparency and explainability. I don't have time to go into all of that, but basically that structure for us gave us a way to be able to guide customers through understanding where the areas of risk are and unpacking that. And they started at various stages, as well as training and education. That was another element. But now we have things like NIST, which is a risk management framework that helps us. And there are other pieces to that are being developed to actually give people more consistency in terms of structure to look through that. But I think you have to, in whatever you use, incorporating that in the entire sort of life cycle of your development is critical to be able to address those areas of risk.
Does anyone else have anything on that?
Go ahead.
So I can speak a little to some of the research that I've done to try to engage users in scenarios that don't exist yet. For example, I did a recent project where we were really interested in kind of the future of the emergency room and how to look at existing emergency rooms and how the built environment basically causes all these various challenges for healthcare workers to treat their patient. For example, like visibility, right? Like healthcare workers need to be able to visually see their patient so that they can see if their patient's condition is degrading. That's one concrete example. So from the floor layout to the spacing in the rooms to people's ability to kind of navigate a space, all of these can have various implications for patient care. And so one thing that we did was we used these design techniques, speculative design. This enables you to kind of engage with users, engage them in a scenario that doesn't exist, that could exist, and try to understand the various implications of, you know, if this scenario happened, like how would this change your scenario from how it is today? And so some design techniques that we use, so we use what we call design probe. So we created this 3D model of like this future emergency room. It was very basic, but you know, it was like fancy enough to get people to think that it was like a future ER. And then we embedded robots into various parts of the ER. Like we had robots like, you know, scurrying from the ceilings. We had robotic chairs. We had like robotic tables. We had these various like pods that can, especially during COVID, you know how they had the isolation types of pods. We had like a robotic version of that. And you know, one way that we try to explore like how these technologies could help is that we ask them questions about like existing scenarios. And then we kind of embedded existing technologies into our design probe, this 3D version of the ER. And then we asked our stakeholders various questions about, you know, if this robot was here, like how could it help? How could it harm? And this is when we started to learn about various privacy concerns, ethical implications, you know, all these various risks that technologies can present to various situations. And so check out my website. I had a CSCW 2022 paper that talked about all these techniques. And so, yeah, you can learn more about that there. My website is angeliquemtaylor.com. Keep it simple.
I thought you wanted to say something on that.
I'll just briefly say, you know, I think a lot of our students, or at least from my era, we were tinkerers. And it was like, oh, I wonder if I can do that with my computer. And I think what we need to do is to start shifting towards a culture, not can we do it, but should we do it? And inculcate that into some of the educational experiences that they have.
We have time for maybe one more question. I'll be brief, I promise. Anyone? Oh. Pick one.
Okay, so when you mentioned the show From All, I'm sorry, Patty Lopez, New Mexico State University, you mentioned the show From All Mankind. It immediately triggered the recognition that it was for mankind. And I see so much in tech of gendered language that's white-centered, that is English language prioritized, and our technology is so wrapped up in the focus of the 80 to 90% of white nation males who are CEOs, when they're actually the 1% of the voices that we hear when you look at the representation in the world. And so our language, history, right? It's about men's experiences writing. We use historical arguments. We don't talk about our story. And you know, there's all kinds of woke stuff you can say about this, but when we start to see that what we're creating, what we're making is our legacy and it's our responsibility, you know, I think Angelique's comment about embodied AI, who we trust and trustability. When you know, Star Trek or Star Wars was 3CPO, was a British voice, right? Like everybody, I think he's super annoying, but he's sometimes also right. And then you think about our diversity training was always delivered in a British accent, so it's always centered around the who we trust. And so my question to our panel is really, you know, when we say we're going to design for the 80%, maybe we should start designing for the 1%. At our conversation this morning, we talked about how accessibility helped everybody. And if we hit that 1% first, if we hit that 2%, who we're not reaching, and we flip it so that we focus on the really hard areas, then what would that look like? That's my question. Thank you.
Anyone want to take that one quick?
Well, yeah, so I absolutely agree. And I was using the 80-20 as sort of, you know, a quick way to make to make a point, but I absolutely think that we need to be considering others, and we certainly seen it in the accessibility space where that has had a benefit on the technology and for all customers. And so that's actually one of the areas that we focus on. I think the reality is there's often a trade-off that's being made, in particular in the context where I work, with businesses that are you know, driven to make money. And so they, you know, my decision to build a system in a certain way or to serve certain customers may mean something in terms of their bottom line. And so we try to use an overall system and the framework that we're talking about to hopefully get at the most of the customer base in the best way so that they could drive, you know, better outcomes for the business overall. And sometimes that means that they may not design for the 1%, right? But there's a little bit more challenge there. But we absolutely are advocating for considering all of our stakeholders, not just a majority.
Yeah, I really like that you mentioned language, because my first language is Spanish, but my second language is English. So one of the things that I really focused on with Girl Innovation is being able to teach CS in Spanish. And trying to get them to learn Scratch through Spanish while still integrating some English, because some of the words are just, you know, like void. When you code Java, it's void in English, so you kind of have to go, okay, but when you text void, like this is what it means in Spanish, so that they kind of like understand the English language within Java, just a broad example. But I really do think it's very important to kind of include that community as well, you know, and kind of like get education towards that level where, although the code may be primarily in English, it could still be understood if Spanish is your first language, just random example. But
ladies and gentlemen, I know we're up on our time. I want to just take a moment to thank you for the opportunity to moderate, and this has been our panel. They've been incredible. Please give them a round of applause. You're absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your insights, and we're so grateful you're here. I have a small speaker gift for you, which is a speaker. All very hard to handle. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, so we have a break coming up next, and then you're going to go to your first set of workshops, and then have lunch, and then go to your second set of workshops. And just a reminder that while most workshops repeat, not all of them do. So please double check the schedule in your Whova app when you're selecting your workshops so you know which ones repeat and which don't. And have a great next few hours. Thank you.